We are live. Yeah, kid. Welcome everybody back to another episode of the Handsome Homebuyer podcast. My name is Charles, aka the Handsome Homebuyer. This is the new improved virtual version. I think I need a better backdrop. I'm going to take care of that next week. I'm not the most tech savvy person, but hey, listen, we're getting it done. We got a bunch of great guests on. We're actually going to be doubling up the amount of people we speak to. Top people in the industry, and today's guest is no exception. He's an unbelievable guy. I love to collaborate like this. One of the top in the industry in the fix and flip market, revolutionizing Suffolk County flips. I get a lot of inspiration from him, and it's going to be very cool to talk about him and kind of talk to him, hash it out, see what he's doing, talk about the market, see what's going on. Brianna, what's up? Like I said, my name is Charles, aka the Handsome Homebuyer. If you have a house that smells like cat pee, is dated from the 1960s. Hold on, let me get into character here. Has 6 inches of mold on the wall. There we go. Now I can do this. Human waste floating past the basement steps, land, commercial property, you name it. I'm doing a ton of different deals across the board, from 7-Eleven to affordable housing, the medical office, to ground up construction, to tons of fix and flips, 1 to 4 family rentals, apartment buildings, buying portfolios of people's rental properties. Whatever it is, I want to buy it. I'm going to put my information in the comments as far as my phone number. I'd love for you guys to hit me up. Realtors, end users, attorneys, anybody. If you have a deal, I'm quick, I'm easy, I'm a good time. I want to buy it. Obviously, I'm also repping Captain Permit. My man, 516-513-8838. We're going to put that in there too, 8838, Captain Permit. If you need plans, if you need permits, if you need anything building department related from coast to coast, I'm talking Elmont to Montauk and everything in between, we got you. I've gotten in trouble anywhere and everywhere you could possibly think of. Learn from my experience. Hit us up. We're happy to talk to you guys. If you're a realtor and you take a listing, you got to be on lotusquotes.com. I'm putting that in the comments right now. lotusquotes.com. If you're a realtor, you do not want to get jammed up with permits and COs, we are going to do the work for you for free, meaning we're going to find out what the deal is. So if you list a property, you actually have it listed on the MLS, go to lotusquotes.com, do the search. You're going to get a free CO search from us. You're going to get an insurance quote from Allstate, and you are going to get a tax grievance analysis to know if your house or your client's house is overassessed, underassessed, or right on point. Dan O'Neill, you're the freaking man. I'm pumped that you're on this thing. All right, so without further ado, we got a dynamite guest. A lot of people, he's a top-notch fix and flip investor. A lot of people out there like, yo, why would you talk to someone like that? Or why would he talk to somebody like me? Listen, there's no competition. There's collaboration. Us talking together, sharing ideas. He's inspired me in a whole bunch of different ways. He doesn't even know that. I'm changing around certain things in my business model, because if you don't have somebody to chase, and if you don't have somebody chasing you, then where's the fire come from? Yeah, you can have the fire, but you want somebody chasing after you, always pushing you to the next level. How am I going to be better? How am I going to be bigger? And they want the same thing. And that's what this gentleman does for me, and I hope a bunch of people in the space. He is Mr. Jeremiah Dalton, Suffolk County House Buyers. Let's hope this thing works. Bam!
What's up?
Did you hear that whole thing?
I heard it. I got to say, I am beyond flattered. Very, very kind of you. And likewise, the way you said I've inspired you, you've done the same on your end as well. Just everything that you've been doing, the way you've been able to diversify into so many other different segments. Just doing one particular asset class is hard enough, but, getting into multiple ones and doing it well is, I know, extremely challenging. So hats off to you on that. And then obviously everything that you're doing with the podcast and helping people. And of course, obviously everything you did with, the Long Island real estate revolution, raising money for such a great cause. And, like I said, I'm glad that I inspire you, but you probably inspire me even more.
Yeah, so it's cool. And I want to put this out there. Obviously, it's you, me, and the world who's ever watching. I'm always a resource to you. I hope you're a resource to me, because again, I think together, knowing each other and all of us knowing each other, I think we could do a lot more business than if we were all on our own little island. So I want to kind of I want to take it back. I want to dig in deep and kind of, talk about, your progression. Because the interesting thing is, I don't know how long you've been in the business. I don't really know much about you. The first thing I think about when I think about you is I think that, the way you market and work your acquisition, I think is brilliant. I think your designs are amazing. I actually went out and now I'm like, yo, listen, Jeremiah's designs are on point. His houses look beautiful. Like, I got to elevate my game further than where it is right now. So, but I've only been in the business for 5 years. I don't know how long you've been in the business for, but all of a sudden it's like overnight, we both met each other and like, oh, you're doing a ton of deals. I'm doing a ton of deals. Where did you come from? But where did you come from? So where did you come from?
Well, I grew up in the construction industry. So my father did a lot of specialty contracting. So I was always around it. I bought my first investment property in my early 20s. I was in law school, met my wife in law school. But I kind of realized very early on, like I wasn't going to be very well suited to sit behind the desk. It just wasn't going to happen. But, for me, the entrepreneurial bug has always been there. But, I had a lot of people in my life, unfortunately, that just always kind of deterred me from that. And it was always, hey, take the safe route, get the education, do that. And when I graduated, it was in 2010. And the market really at that point, especially in the legal industry, was in the complete shitter. And I bounced around a lot and ultimately, did a few different things that were not even law related, actually more construction related. And then found myself at a job, working for the union that I actually grew up in and that my father was a part of. It was supposed to be a legal position and I did some legal stuff, but in reality though, it wasn't anywhere close to what I thought it was going to be. And I was stuck in that rut for a couple years. And really wasn't progressing, making good money. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and complain. But for me, there was just no passion with anything that I was doing. I wanted to make a difference in the place that I was at. But for whatever reason, they just kept stonewalling me. And it was like more or less stick me in the corner doing stupid stuff. And, that's a whole other conversation for another day. But I knew in my heart of hearts that, I had that point had my first child. I felt as though I was really setting a poor example for her. Because,
how old were you at that point?
I'm sorry?
How old were you at that point when you had your first kid?
30.
How old are you now?
I'm just turned 35 a month ago.
Yeah, man. Yeah, you look young, got a good head of hair still.
Well, that's genetic. The hair is genetic. I appreciate that because I feel old as hell when you have 3 children under the age of 5. Like, it ages you. Like, I look at myself at 30 and I look at myself now. There's a difference.
That's a topic in itself, but I want, like, you hit on so many things and I want you to elaborate on because I think they're so important for people. First thing is, bro, it is very hard to, there's always naysayers. Like, what we do, like what you and I do on a daily basis is normal to us. And I'm not saying we're out there curing cancer, but at the same time, not a lot of people have the courage to just go and be like, hey, listen, I'm going to spend $300,000 on something that I think I can renovate and sell for $550. So with all those naysayers around, how did you overcome that and eventually get to the point where you're like, yo, this is what I'm going to do? And then ultimately, how did you find real estate?
I ultimately knew it was something I wanted to do. I mean, I was reading fix and flip books in law school, but I just never could wrap my mind around raising money. I never executed, I read a lot of books. I went to events. But, there's a lot of people out there that I see, the information only takes you so far. But a lot of people out there that they're like professional event goers, but they never acted. And I was honestly one of those people for a while. And finally, it was just, I got to the point where I was just so frustrated in my life that I was like, I have to make a change. I wrote a book about this, which we always talk about another time. But the title of the book is Get Fucking Pissed. And that was my life. Dude, that was my life. I was so angry with the progression of where I was going, the way that worked, the way I was treated, like basically like the village idiot, and the example that I was setting for my kids. At the time, it was just my daughter, and then subsequently had 2 more children. I mean, I was just, people talk about anger like it's a bad thing, but I'll tell you, me getting so angry and frustrated with the situation that I was in led me to make a real substantive change. So I went out, and this is right around the time where you could still find stuff on the open market and make somewhat of a profit. So I found a bank-owned property.
How long ago? Like, when did you get into the game? How long ago was this?
2015 was when I started to say, like, all right, this is when, you know, I'm going to really make the move. So at that time, there was still some semblance of properties that you could make money on. And so I found a house. It was a 3-bedroom, 1.5-bath ranch. And it was really the first. I had done other stuff. I had bought rental properties. I had my first, as I was saying, my first property, investment property, which I still own, which is a condo in New Jersey. So I had been involved in real estate, but that was when I was like, I'm really going to go for this. And subsequently, I made money. The deal was a little tight. I wouldn't do that kind of deal right anymore, but it was enough to make money and say, okay, you know what? I can do this. But that was right around the time that the market really started to heat up.
Yeah.
Then, you know, real estate really, I mean, it was boom. It was moving then. But then, as we all know, you know, by like early 2016, the late 2016, it really started to get intense. Yeah. And I had now bid on everything. And I was like, and I was still working a full-time job. So I didn't have time. I couldn't really go to the steps, you know, or anything like that. So I had found a mentor, and, you know, he had told me, listen, I'm going to start. He was buying a lot of his stuff on the MLS. He said, and he was not even in our market in Colorado. And he said, I'm going to start doing some direct mailing. And there's a guy I think, you know, might be a good fit. So I called the guy. And it was funny. I basically took a bunch of money that I had made on one flip, which wasn't very much. It was the second house I did. And I didn't really make much. And I sunk all that money into a direct mail campaign. And from there, I pulled out 2 houses that from those 2 houses each was more money than I had made on previous houses combined. And I was like, all right, well, I think I got something here. And, you know, it's funny, you have the naysayers, and I won't mention this particular agent's name, but I remember going to her with, hey, I'm still working full time. I'm generating these leads. Is this something you'd be interested in doing? And she kind of said, yeah, you know, and then as I started like throwing the stuff at her, because, you know, a lot of these people that we talk to, they don't even want to meet. They want to just, they're just tire kickers, but you have to entertain some of the tire kickers. It's just the way it is.
You never know who you're talking to.
You never know who you're talking to. You never know how you're going to get your foot in the door. And I would say, listen, I need an ARV on this or this. And she basically went off on me and told me this was a complete waste of time. And so I kind of more or less shrugged my shoulders and said, okay, well, you know, I'll move on to the next person. And, you know, wound up working with somebody else. And since then I've now worked, you know, with Dan and Zach, as you know. But yeah, I mean, I got laughed at by a lot of people because what we see with the amount of bank-owned properties and foreclosures, that's not common anywhere else around the country.
No, New York's another planet, man.
New York's another planet. So, like, I started befriending a lot of investors just around the country, and no, you go to their courthouse steps, one property goes up for auction. You know what I mean? If that at their county. So, you know, what we have is just a different phenomenon, but. You know, so I started marketing and, you know, basically decided that that was the route I was going to take. I was going to go to people who had a real need to sell quick and sell, you know, at a number that made sense for both parties, and do whatever we can to make the process as easy as we can. And ultimately, that's really what solved it, was buying properties at the right price that I could do the right thing, hire the right people, so that I didn't have to hover over everybody. And it allowed me to scale, because I see a lot of these guys, you know, they're buying properties at the steps, or they're buying something online, or, you know, whatever, it's a bank-owned property, and they're stretching every single dollar. And you just can't do that in this business. Nah. You know what I mean?
So let me ask you a question, a couple of things. A, I have to comment on this because I've been looking at your name, Jeremiah Dalton. That shit is smooth, bro. Like, I want to be Jeremiah Dalton. Like, Jeremiah Dalton is a rock star with girls.
Oh, see, I don't think that way. Man.
Jeremiah Dalton is a porn star with an 18-inch hammer. Like, Jeremiah Dalton is the guy. Like, that name is just smooth.
I thank you. I don't, you know, it's funny, actually, I'm the 7th. Jeremiah Joseph Dalton, I'm the 7th. My father's the 6th. My son is the 8th. So it's like a family legacy name. But yes, there's definitely.
That's one. So the second question I have is, do you, like, so you didn't have a lot of formal education. Like, you were like, I want to get into the space. I know how to market. I kind of know how to, you know, run a business and put people together and hire the right people and delegate, which is massively important, right? But as far as like ARVs and things like that, you were relying on others for that information?
I was. And you have to trust the right people. I didn't grow up in Long Island. I grew up in Staten Island. I moved to Long Island in 2012. So really the market in Long Island was kind of a mystery. I mean, I knew more about Buffalo, New York than I did about, Long Island. So it came from, I mean, it was a leap of faith to a certain extent, but putting my trust in people who I felt were going to give me good numbers. Now, granted, you trust but verify, right? So you say, okay, what numbers are you thinking? And then they show it to you and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, cool. And then eventually over time, like, now even with, Dan and Zach, the trust has been developed that I don't need to see comps. They give me a number. I know it's solid, but yeah, I mean, I would recommend to anyone who's doing that, if you want to work with a realtor, that's great. I've done it. It's worked for me. But in the beginning, you got to trust but verify. So
it's really interesting you say that, because I'm on the other end of the spectrum. And the way you did it, I think, is brilliant. And you're very lucky because, I mean, Dan is the fucking man. And he's super young and he hasn't been in the mix for a long time. And I can't wait to see what happens to him as life goes on. But that's a lot of trust, because I personally, and this is no disrespect to agents, I never ask. I asked Dan 3 weeks ago his opinion, and I asked Brian Carper about something very specific like 2 days ago. But aside from those two instances in the last 4.5, 5 years that I've been in the business, I've never asked a realtor what their opinion was of what a property is worth, because I felt maybe it was a control thing, but I also felt that it wasn't their responsibility. And a lot of guys would say to me like, yo, the realtor screwed me. So I give you a lot of credit because you've enabled.
Did you freeze up, Charles? Is that me? Uh-oh.
This often causes that. We're back. So
okay, cool.
What you did is like, because what we do is kind of like is a real grind. For me, it's a means to an end, but you've actually been able to structure it in a way where you can hang out with your family. Like you can have 3 kids.
Yeah, well, you have to understand, I had to set it up that way because I was working. I worked in Queens. I had to be in work at 6:30 in the morning and I was out at 5:30 at night. So I was gone by 5:30. I was home by 7. I had to figure out how to structure this as a business before I actually left to pursue it full time. So again, it comes from, there's no such thing as self-made. Like I don't consider myself self-made in any way. Like I'm only here because I've just had the right people to help me scale, the right contractors, the right realtors, the, home inspectors, the right people to help me with marketing. I don't know how to do any of this. I mean, I'm dumb shit. You know what I mean? But the reality is that I've had good people around me, but I had to build that business before I actually left because I was making very good money. My wife and I, we live in Centerport. We live in a nice area. We were already accustomed to quote unquote nice things. Yeah. It was very hard for me to do. I wasn't going to disrupt my lifestyle to the extent where I was going to take my kids out of this great area to grow up in and, downsize and, try to. And I respect the hell out of people who do that. But I wasn't about to do that. So I had to figure out how was I going to replace my income. And then the only way to do that was to hire people and basically build that business while I was still working a full-time job.
Yeah, I mean, basically everybody, the key to, and this, the interesting thing is, again, you were an attorney. And again, no disrespect to attorneys, but attorneys like doctors are typically not business people. So you really have done an amazing job of, utilizing your skill set of a business person, which is delegating, structuring, developer standard operating procedures, things like that. I'm sure there are days where you want to like rip the hair out of your head and you.
I had that yesterday,
That was it. I mean, but it seems like you've really done a great job. Like for me, I flip houses as a means to an end to get into development and then private equity, which is where I want to go. Because I kind of felt, and maybe I was naive and wrong because you're doing it, that I had to be on that level to really get the right people to be able to step away a little bit. Sure. You seem to be doing that now, which is awesome.
Yeah, I think there's a million different ways to do it. You know what I mean? So like for me, going back, it was, all right, I can't go. Remember, I was generating all these leads and I was like, well, what do I do? You know what I mean? So I had to have somebody like answer the phone for me because I was at work. You know what I mean? And then it kind of just slowly built up where it was like, okay, well, now you answer the phone. These are the people who handle the appointments, pass that information along to them, set up the appointment. So it kind of just developed itself naturally. But there's still holes in my business that I still find myself very, very involved in. And listen, I'm very fortunate. My wife is my attorney. You know what I mean? So that element's covered. So that eliminates a lot of stuff. And nobody else is going to put up with me. So I'm stuck. You know what I mean?
Give just so people can really relate. Because I think people they'll look at you and they'll be like, yo, he's a well-oiled machine. He's, there's no problems in his day-to-day life. Like, give an example of something you're struggling with right now, a particular hole in your business where you're like, fuck, man, I got to figure out a way to do this better because it's really taking too much time and messing me up.
Well, I think the contractor stuff, I have multiple crews going on and they're all calling me, hey, can you come over here? Can you look at this? And a lot of that is on autopilot to a certain extent. But unfortunately, there are situations that come up. I need, Jeremiah, I really need your opinion on that. And going back to my construction background, I can go to something and look at it and say, okay, this is what we need to do. But yeah, I mean, I try to use GCs so they act as kind of de facto project managers. But it would be great to kind of have somebody, fill in the gap because unfortunately, listen, I'm blessed to have good crews. We all know how hard that is. But, these guys hit me up all the time on the phone, and yes, I'm with my kids a lot. And yes, I spend a lot of time with them. But there's also a lot of times where, we're outside playing on the swing set and I'm pushing the kid at the same time. I'd like to eliminate that element too, because I don't want to be remembered too as the dad that was constantly on the phone. But that, I think, is a big part of the business. The acquisition side, for the most part, is pretty well handled. I'll intervene at the end when things need to be fine-tuned. But the acquisition part is pretty well handled. The marketing stuff, I still kind of handle. I'm always tweaking that, feel what we can do better, what we can do more of or less of. But I would say the construction side of it, I still am more heavily involved in than I would like to be.
Yeah, no, I get it. So I did... the first house that I did, I used a GC. And during that experience, I'm like, oh, this ain't gonna work. For me, I'm like, this isn't gonna work. So I very quickly basically opened up a construction company that I scaled, that I have a foreman. So that actually, it's interesting how, where you excel in certain things, I don't as well, and then vice versa. So I actually went the other route. I right away basically built a construction company that only does my stuff. I have a foreman that runs all the crews and coordinates the subcontractors. And then my dad coordinates all the material drops and things like that. Okay. I go to the house one time at the beginning, give a high level overview. We have software that manages the process and they take pictures daily. Sure. And that's what I end up doing, which really takes that load off me. I don't really, because now I want to focus more on the marketing aspect. I have a ton of relationships. But if I just want to get to a disrespectful amount of deals just to push myself, now I want to focus more on that. And you've perfected that, but you're struggling with the construction. I'm like the flip of that.
Yeah. And for me, the construction part is easy. It's just that there's so many times, I live in Centerport, but I've had deals that are an hour and a half east of me. You know what I mean? So it's the driving back and forth that I think, kind of, makes you a little nuts. These days, I'm not going to lie, with the quarantine and everything, it's kind of it gives me an excuse to get out of the house and whatnot. But regardless, yeah, I mean, that's an element I think for sure that I struggle with. And I do I always go to the job at the beginning and we try to develop a scope, and I'm not there every week. You know what I mean? I try to go as little as I can, but unfortunately, as you know, when, you scale and you have a lot of deals, invariably once a week, somebody is going to call you and you're going to have to show up to some particular house. And, I just lose a lot of time just driving. So yeah, that's an element of mine that, I want to, tweak and improve. And don't get me wrong, listen, everything from acquisitions to marketing to dispositions to the legal, all of it. You know what I mean? Well, maybe not the legal because wife's over there, but everything else.
Is she sitting there listening to this right now?
Oh yeah, we basically have a shared
right now. You gotta let me, dude. I'm talking about your hammer, and you're a porn star, and she's sitting off screen.
I think we all know that you're joking, or you weren't offended by that, right? Yeah, she wasn't offended.
No, I wasn't joking about any of that. That was 100% serious. Yeah. I was like, I want to be named Jeremiah Dalton because that's just cool.
Well, I think that's the first time anyone's ever said that that's a cool name. So she was probably sitting there rolling her eyes, probably thinking to herself, I don't think it's a cool name.
Dude, kind of like, so you think about Dalton from Roadhouse, Patrick Swayze, who's the name.
Yeah.
And then you have Jeremiah, which is smooth with kind of like a biblical thing to it. So you're like a biblical badass.
I mean, listen, I'd like to think, I am, but in reality, I'm not, you know what I mean? No. But yeah, listen, I appreciate it. I'll take it.
Reality, man.
I'll take it, man. When I was growing up, I always wanted like a normal name, like Steven or Brian. You know what I mean? But I dabble as I've gotten older. People have said, "Oh, that's a cool name." I don't hear that, but actually, it's become a more popular name now.
Yeah. So I want to talk about this. We'll keep it a little bit brief, only because I feel like people want to know about it, but I feel like it's like getting beaten into the ground, which is your professional opinion being at the level that you are of the current market conditions, everything you see, and just like a 12-month window in like 3-month blocks of how you feel things are going to go.
Well, we were talking about this before. I think it's going to come in waves. So when everything boils down to this supply and demand, that's it. You know what I mean? Like that's everyone wants to go crazy. I mean, I shouldn't say it's supply, demand, and liquidity. When 2008 happened, we had an overabundance of supply on the market, coupled with a decrease in demand because there was a recession caused by the real estate industry, with banks that basically were in poor condition and had no ability to fund. So you're talking about the perfect storm as far as, real estate's concerned back in 2008. So when everyone said, oh, this is 2008 all over again, I'm sorry, but every recession is different and it's not. Now, in the short term, I think it's great. I think it's both a great time to buy and sell. And the reason is that if you sell and you're competitively priced, certainly the vacancy versus non-occupied homes do create a problem for obvious reasons. But if you're priced right, there's no inventory. Even though, I think supply is down 50%, but demand is only down 23%. So what does that tell you? So from that element, it's a great time to sell. As far as
within our market, though, within our target price point.
Yes, within our target price point for sure. Now, on the other side of it, if you're buying, there's going to be a lot of people out there who have overpriced their homes, and they're going to be under the impression that it's COVID related. And if you're a buyer that's looking for their home, I wouldn't be afraid to make an offer that would be a lot lower than you would normally make, because the seller might say, you know what, it's COVID, we got to take what we can get. And you might score yourself a house that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to afford. So I think from both a buy and sell standpoint, it's a great opportunity in the short term. Once these, restrictions are lifted and everybody comes out, I think in the short term, it's going to be even worse, because I think the buyer demand is going to far outpace how many sellers put their home on. So I think 3 months, 0 to 3 months, it's great. 3 to 6, even better. After 6 is where I think things could get a little tricky, because a lot of that pent up demand will have died off. And a lot of the fallout from people who are unfortunately, just on the receiving end of just poor economic situation may be inclined to say, you know what, I got to list my home now, or they want to get out of here. You know what I mean? That's another thing. But I'm not buying so much the fleeing of New York. I know people keep talking about it, but me personally, if people didn't flee like after 9/11, they're not going to really flee after a virus. It's just, I understand certain people, but to me, if you think about it logically, I'm more concerned of, honestly, a terrorist attack in Manhattan than I am being in a densely populated area during a pandemic. That's just me. So I think this mass exodus that they're talking about, I don't see that. The only thing I could see is that maybe some of the Manhattan market suffers because now people could work from home. So the need to live in the city for commute purposes. But I think that only helps our situation. But like I said, that 6 to 12 month period, I think is when things might get a little tricky. And then past 12 months, well, it depends, you know, how much did all this financial relief, you know, keep people from defaulting on their mortgages, and, you know, how many people ultimately default, and, you know, how many people, you know, we all know that by the time my wife used to defend banks in foreclosure, so I know this intimately well. How many people who defaulted on their mortgages, when will that wave, that, you know, this financial hardship that people are experiencing now, when will that wave hit? You know what I mean? And that could be a very long time from now, but that's too far away to even predict what kind of effect that will have. But I definitely think in the short term it's good. And I think, you know, latter part of the year is when you might start seeing a slowdown, but I don't think it's major. I think it's just kind of be, you know, a little bit of a dip.
Yeah, no, I don't even think I see the dip. For me, I'm pretty optimistic for the next few years. I think 5 years down the road, I think we're fucked. I think the next recession is going to be really bad. And I am actually really concerned about New York. I'm not concerned about Long Island right now, because I think if there's an exodus, whatever, people are going to come here from the boroughs. I've been tracking it. You could already see them going to the Hamptons. You can see them going to Westchester. You can go and see them going to Florida. Long term, because of the trend changes, I'm actually really worried about New York, because I love New York, right? But if you take away the lifestyle and the money, New York is a cold, dirty place that's fucking expensive, with bums with rotting legs on every corner. So if you're working for Google making $250 a year, and you could go make $250 a year in Colorado working for home and snowboard and live this lifestyle and not pay any state taxes or whatever, what the hell are you living here for?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point. But again, I think that's also under the assumption that some of that entertainment stuff is going to go away completely. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I don't know. You know what I mean? And that part is definitely a mystery. You know, for me, most of my stuff is in Suffolk, and it's western to central Suffolk. I don't see a lot of people really fleeing Manhattan, you know what I mean, to live in Patchogue. You know what I mean? It's just, I see them leaving Manhattan to live Garden City, to see them live in Levittown, to see them live in Westbury. I could see that, but I'm in an area where I don't maybe see that. But yeah, I mean, I do understand where you're coming from with that. I think a lot of people like living in New York. I think there's still a lot of things that even Long Island brings to the table. But if you can work remotely, I think, to me, that's really the big thing. If you could work remotely, you know, take it from a guy who did 3 hours of commuting, you know what I mean? If they allowed me to work remotely, I might still be at my job, as much as I hated it, you know what I mean? So I think for a lot of people, you know, if they're willing to work, if they're allowed to work remotely, yeah, we're going to see a huge benefit from that, you know?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what goes on. So another thing I want to talk about with you, again, because one of the things that really stands out when I think of you is the designs of your houses. So you do an exceptional job, in my opinion, of design.
I don't do it. I just want to tell you, it's not me. I couldn't pick a paint.
I had a feeling you were going to say that, but that's fine. Listen, you can't do everything, bro. Yeah. But just the fact that you do it is exceptional. You seem to stage every house, which, you know, there's debates on, is it worth it, is it not? I know it's not cheap, but just kind of talk about the design and the way that you position the properties to be marketed, because you do a very good job of it.
So for me, what I look at with staging is, you know, pretty much all of our flips are funded with private money. And we pay them a good interest rate.
Actually, let me stop you there for half a second. When you say private money, are you raising private money from private people? Or
correct. I started with just my own money, and I basically did the partnership with my dad, the first house, and then over time raised some what I call informal private money from like family and friends, where it's more just like a promissory note than anything else. But then as we grew, it became private money. But, you know, if you look up mortgages on my property, you'll see the note holders are individuals. They're not companies. But
that's cool. I do that. And that's why you and I are in a great position right now, because for the guys that went to the institutional lenders, they're out of business for a while.
I know. So, You know, and I did a lot of hard money for a while, but as I started to grow, I was like, I'm not going to be able to scale this because even with the institutional stuff, you got to kick in a lot of your own money, and then plus all the repair drawers and everything else. I mean, you got to lay out a lot. So I knew that to scale, yeah, I had to, you know, go to the individual peoples and make the, you know, make it more tailored to what I needed. But yeah, we pay these guys, you know, we pay them very good interest rates, and we're very proud to do that. But because time is such a factor, I look at staging as, okay, I may not get more for the property, but it's going to sell faster, right? So when my holding costs are what they are per month, I say, hey, if you could cut 3 weeks off of, you know, when I get this deal sold, it's paid for itself. You know what I mean?
Of course.
So that's kind of the element that I look at it. But that said, not every house we do get staged. If there's certain things about the house, I mean, I put 2 houses on the market at the same time on Tuesday, one in Holbrook, one in Patchogue. I staged Holbrook. I didn't stage Patchogue because I felt Holbrook's design layout just called for staging more, whereas Patchogue is more self-explanatory. Price points, I mean, anything, you know, to high 4s and above, we pretty much always stage. Because it's just, you're attracting a different kind of buyer. But on the lower end, you know, I've got a lot of stuff that's, you know, I have a house in Central Islip we didn't stage, a few houses in Ridge, we won't stage them. So it really is a case-by-case basis. But yeah, I do think that it helps. But like I said, it's more on the higher end side. And then on, you know, the design element, yeah, that's not anything to do with me. But I do feel as though every house you kind of have to look at. I mean, I have like several different designs, so it's not like I'm going crazy on every house. I more or less know, like, especially listen, if a house is hardwood floors, I know that chances are I can't do like the light stain look. You know what I mean? It's just not going to work. You have to do a dark stain. So when we do a dark stain, then it's a certain color that goes with it, along with a certain island. So a lot of that stuff is systematized. But yeah, we do try to take an individual approach. You know, every house, you know, depending if it's by the water, if it's got, you know, we might try to incorporate that. But again, that's a standard set of designs that we already have implemented. So each house we tweak a little bit. But I could tell you, like, I'm not going to Home Depot and I'm not going to Floor & Decor on every house, you know, trying to reinvent the wheel. I mean, I do want to systematize it as much as I can, but not necessarily have it, you know, across the board, because how you do a house in Central Islip versus how I do a house in Greenport or Baiting Hollow or Setauket, they're completely different animals. And so we just try to tailor it accordingly.
No, that's smart. It makes sense. And I always, like, at the beginning, when I first got into this, you know, 4.5 years ago, 5 years ago, I actually went to Home Depot and I copied the SKUs down for every and then built these sheets and all this shit. But you know, what I would do every year and a half or whatever is I would hire a designer to go pick me out 4 bathrooms and put it together, pick me out some kitchen combos, and I would just rip out the same thing.
Yeah.
For a while, it looked really, really good. And then I started seeing your stuff and I'm like, fuck, man, I got to up the bar here. Like, I need to, you know, make it. So now I'm going to start to like to tailor them a little bit more and customize them a little bit more, especially like when you have the construction relationships, you can do cool little tweaks that are expensive but aren't really expensive.
They're not exactly, you know.
But I think in general, people that renovate houses, like, you know, guys and girls that renovate houses, they don't do a great job with design. Like, the design typically sucks. So I think you're really like one of the best out there as far as, you know, mixing the two together. Because some of the stuff I see, like, you use that basket weave tile floor in the bathroom, right? Mm-hmm. Which looks awesome, and I mean it's a little bit pricier than what people might think. But, you know, if you're doing 20 square feet, does it really matter?
That's the point. And what the beauty of that tile is that you could put it in like a $300,000 to $400,000 house, and people are like, "Wow, look at this!" And it also fits in a sick. I put that same tile on the floor in Selden as I do in Baiting Hollow, as I will in Setauket. You know what I mean? So, and like you said, obviously, if I had a ton of bathrooms or large size bathrooms, I couldn't do it because it would start to add up. But when you're doing a bathroom and it's, you know, a 5x8 bathroom and you've got 20 square feet of tile, whether it's $8 a square foot or $4 or $2, it's really not going to make a difference. And then unfortunately though, for a lot of people, you know, $1,000, $1,000, $2,000, whatever it might be on some of these flips, they can't eat that kind of overage, and that goes back to buying properties at the right price. That allows me to just, hey, like, listen, if something pops up and it's a several $1,000 overage, I'm fortunate enough to say, okay, just do it. You know what I mean? It's not going to change things dramatically, and we move on. You know what I mean? And that's how, like I said, it's allowed me to scale, and it's allowed me to, spend more time with my family. The stuff that goes wrong on a day-to-day basis usually isn't because of cost overages. You know what I mean? It's usually because of something else that's just gumming up the system, that's just making my life hell. But if somebody calls and said, we have a house, hey, you're going to need a brand new hot water heater. Okay, fine. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't even think about it, and that makes a big difference in, keeping your sanity with this business.
So two more things I want to touch on before we go. So you talk about contractors. I always say people like, my kind of like famous thing is money's the easiest part of this business. Contractors is the hardest part of this business. You obviously are doing a lot of houses, so you have multiple GC crews. How did you go about finding quality contractors? Because I think that is really, really the hardest part for the average person doing this.
Yeah, listen, I'm not proud to say it, but I mean, I've had houses that I wasn't proud of because I had poor GCs. You know what I mean? I would say in pretty much any time I've had a GC, it's been a referral. But it's been hit or miss. I would tell people, in the beginning, you really, really want to keep a very close eye, try to do it on a project where you got a lot of room. So if shit goes bad, you know what I mean? You could swap them out and bring someone in if the deal is tight. And for some people, it's their first deal. Don't try to bring somebody in that you don't have a relationship with. On deals where not every deal is, some are singles and some are home runs, but on a deal that might be a single, I'm going to bring my guy that's been around for a while. You know what I mean? Because I know that if something goes wrong, we'll work it out. It won't be the end of the world. So I try out new guys on houses that have a little bit more room. But it's always been a referral basis. Hard to really tell you. I mean, it's been a situation where, if you've made it past one project with me, you're good. If you can't, but typically I'll know very quickly. So the ones that have never lasted, they stopped after one project. They didn't even make it through that one project. They were fired by the time the project was over. So that was, I think for me, I was able to tell. Unfortunately, you could attest to this. You don't really get an idea of how good they are until they start getting into the finish work. You know what I mean? Like when a house is opened up and, they're doing their framing, we look at plumbing, but we're not plumbers. We're not electricians. It's when you start closing the house back up and when you start putting the sheetrock on and you see the lines aren't good and the paint is sloppy and the trim is bad and the floors aren't. That's when you know. But unfortunately, you're 80% of the way there at that point. You know what I mean? And that's when I've usually pulled the hook on these guys and said, okay, this isn't going to work. And I've had to bring one of my normal guys in to finish. That's just the way it is sometimes. But it is without a doubt the hardest part of it all. I would say finding deals is pretty damn close. But yeah, the money is not the hard part. Maybe now with some of the institutional things, it could be a little more difficult. But yeah, the money is not the hard part.
So I want to close out with this. You're starting the industry. You rose, very fast over the last 4 to 5 years. What's the future look like? What are you looking to do? Where is Jeremiah Dalton in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Is he flipping? Is he chilling? Is he doing more rentals? What's he doing?
Well, I mean, listen, I've always wanted to flip. I don't think I'll ever stop flipping. I do enjoy it. The goal is to systematize it and grow. To do north of 100 houses a year, but have it be a systematized business. It's very hard. It's not a sellable business because a lot of it is dependent on the operator. But to get north of 100 houses a year, and on a systemized basis where I'm not spending, even though I'm not spending a ton of time on the business, I want to do more and spend less. So I think that element is really important. The next level is definitely in a passive income, whether that's in single family rentals, apartment buildings, or even other businesses. That's an element that I've really started to explore, buying other businesses, acquiring other businesses that, for whatever reason, they can provide you that kind of cash flow. But I expect, and I fully expect, within 5 years that the flipping business will just be another business. It'll just be another cash flowing business for me. But in an effort to, quote unquote, diversify, I think I would probably ideally like to move outside of real estate a little bit, because I think there's a lot of different opportunities, especially with the fallout from this virus. I think there's going to be a lot of different things outside of real estate that you could really capitalize on.
Yeah, no, I get. Do you ever worry about, going long-term at scale? Because this is something like when I was around that 100 house mark, I was like, bro, I would look at my board. I'd be like, this is nutso. Like, we have $30 million on the street right now. What happens if things go bad? And ultimately, last year, I ended up pulling back, not out of fear, but more of out of feeling like, yo, something doesn't feel right here. I didn't think it was going to be a virus. I just ultimately felt that people were overpaying, and I wasn't going to get caught up in that whole thing. But does doing those large numbers and having a lot of money on the street, does that worry you in any way, or you just?
No, I mean, I was more stressed when I had my first house than I do now with having, 15 to 20 at a time. You know what I mean? You definitely build up to it. Especially now, I don't see that as being a problem. It's just a matter of finding the right people to fill those seats. Project management, coordination of, styles, designs, that kind of thing.
I meant from the standpoint of if the market changes.
Well, I mean, listen, to me, we are fortunate that we're in a market that I think I still believe if you could survive 2008, you could survive just about anything in real estate, as far as this real estate's concerned. Listen, could some cataclysmic event occur that dramatically changes the landscape? Yes, I think that's possible. But I mean, I think a lot of people we're still afraid. Seasoned investors who do a lot more than I do, they got hit in 2008 and they kind of kept looking back, waiting for that shoe to drop. But you understand, the last 5 recessions that occurred, the only time it really went down was 2008 because it was caused by the real estate market. So traditionally, over the long haul, it's always been good. But again, you always have to go down to supply and demand. And when people kept telling me like, oh, the market's going to tank, people are overpaying, I kept looking and just saying, well, why are they overpaying? And they're overpaying because there's just no inventory. So, I'll look at things. I mean, we've had a far less amount of new construction than we've ever had. You know what I mean? So from a supply standpoint, I just don't see our supply chain. I have to look at some real key metric or factor that's going to say this is going to inundate our supply chain, that it's going to cause a price drop. And I don't see anything. I don't see that
problem because there's no Long Island's built out. There's no land.
There's no land. That's the point. You know what I mean? And the cost of new construction is expensive. You know this. I mean, to buy something with new construction, you have to basically steal the land. You know what I mean? In order for it to make sense. And so that's very, very hard. You look around, I mean, there are places you could build, but this being in the expediting business, just the red tape that's involved just to get things approved, it's disincentivizing anyone from building anything. So I just think our supply, our demand is increasing. The supply is pretty much staying where it is or decreasing. And so from the long term, it just makes things seem very, very, very positive. We didn't have the situation, leading up to 2008, we had all these crazy loans that were being made that, of course, allowed so many people to buy. And, we all know the story with that. But if you look at, granted, lending eased up, up until now, but you still had to prove that you could pay the loan. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, oh, I got a pulse, here's the loan. You still had to prove that you could actually pay the loan. So I'm pretty bullish on all of that. Again, what happens with this virus, and does that cause enough people to listen, if everybody threw their home on the market today, yeah, we'd have a real problem. And so that, I think, is a slight concern, but not enough to say like, I'm worried about, the future of flipping. But that's just me.
Perfect. Nah, I really appreciate it, man. Listen, Jeremiah, you're awesome. I respect the hell out of you. I appreciate you coming on. Love chopping it up with you. I'm sure the people love to hear it as well. If an agent wants to work with you, or if someone's looking to sell a house or whatever it is, how do they get in touch with you? Website, social media, etc. And feel free also to put it in the comments so anybody that's in there can.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I give out my cell phone to pretty much everybody, so they can always call me on my cell. They can go to my website, SuffolkCountyHouseBuyers.com, and they'll see there's a number to call. That'll go to my assistant, and we'll gladly, come out and take a look at anything. If a realtor brings me something, we always give them the listing on the back end. And yeah, they can find me on Instagram, Suffolk County House Buyers, or they can find me on either Facebook through that same name, or they can just find my personal name, Jeremiah Dalton.
Awesome. Yeah. And obviously, I'm the Handsome Homebuyer. If you have a house that smells like cat pee, it's dated from the 1960s, commercial property, land, you name it, I'm quick, I'm easy, I'm a good time. My name isn't quite as smooth as Jeremiah's, but I want to buy it. 516-777 sold. Share this, like this. That's a wrap, people.
Orgulloso estoy de mi herencia judía. Benjamin Ben Shlomo, cuando me llaman a la torre, así me llamo yo. Orgulloso estoy de mi herencia judía.